So nu.
Okay.
No,
And then I press here. Got it. Okay. Just. Yeah. Welcome to this lecture on sexual evolution, according to Martinus. And I'm hoping to give you a very brief survey of what Martinus says on this subject. He says a lot, he's written a lot about this. And I'm going to focus mainly on the cosmic cycle of the pole principle. This part of Martinus's world picture is perhaps the most groundbreaking and also potentially controversial part. At the same time, it explains so much of what is taking place in all human beings and in relationships on this earth today. And when this knowledge becomes more widely spread, it's going to help us enormously to understand ourselves and our fellow beings and make relationships easier, and also make it easier for us to organize society so the society fits who we are. But we also need to be aware of that it's not always an easy view to take in. I remember distinctly one summer, many years ago here in Klint, a young, bright man from South America took part in the international study group. And he was taking on Martinus' world picture with great enthusiasm and joy. And many things seemed to fall into place for him. But when it came to the transformation of our sexual poles, he became confused and seemed bewildered and even hurt. He had a Catholic background, and we need to keep in mind that these analyses, most often one needs to have the questions that Martinus' analysis give the answers to. If you don't have the questions, then it's not really nourishment for you. And if one is experiencing an intimate, for the time lasting relationship, maybe married, having children, and you feel intellectually and sexually satisfied, then maybe you don't need these analyses, at least not yet. And Martinus also mentions in Livets Book 5 that Christian religion is a religion of man and woman, and that it also protects the right of ownership. So that can be useful to have in mind, that it is rather, let's say, sprängstoff, you would say in Swedish. It's these analyses can be difficult, and at the same time they are absolutely amazing, explaining so much of what we're experiencing today. And Martinus, how do I? Sorry, I need some help here. Where do I want the next slide. There, okay, it was different when it's on Zoom. Here we have Martinus's main symbol, and we'll come to that shortly. Martinus' definition of sexuality is much wider than we are used to and what is commonly known. It has to do with experiencing pleasantness and the hunger for pleasantness, and also the satisfaction of experiencing it, and also the satiation that occurs, and then the growth of a new hunger. And in its widest sense, it is really about perceiving or sensing anything in life, reacting to it, and sending something out. And that's a cycle that takes place all the time, and that is what life is. And always, wherever we are in the spiral cycle, and also wherever we are, whichever spiral cycle we're in. So that's very basic. And we can see this symbolized in the, now let me see, I'm going to change the cursor here. Mikael just taught me. Oh, that was wrong. Oh, I'll have to make do with this cursor. Why doesn't it work when I do it? No. Ah, never mind. You see the star in the middle. This is the main symbol, number 11. The eternal world picture, the living being two, or the eternal Godhead and the eternal sons of God. And I'm using it in the last sense, the eternal Godhead and the eternal sons of God, where we see the eye of the Godhead and the star, center of the symbol. The white plate that lies behind the whole symbol is everybody's eyes and the Godhead's eye. X1, Martinus calls this. I'm not going into detail here. So if you're not familiar with that, that will come back in other lectures also. And we see how the eye of the Godhead also appears in the eyes of the living beings, these circles around the periphery of the this plate or circle. So here we have the individual's eyes that are part of the Godhead's eyes. So on that level, which is stillness, the source of everything, there we are all, oh, it's doing things that I don't want it to do. There. We are all the same. We are all part of the same eye. But then we experience ourselves as individuals, which we also are. And we see how the rays around this star in the center are directed outwards to the periphery. It's the X2 or super consciousness of the Godhead. And the Godhead is everything that surrounds us. Everything we come across in life is part of the Godhead. And we also see how from each individual eye in the periphery, there's energy directed towards the center. And that's how life is constructed. That life experience takes place in the meeting between these energies, the energy we send out and the energy we meet from the Godhead, from our surroundings. And that meeting takes place in the created world, where we are, in the physical world or the spiritual world, where consciousness is, in X3 or the created world. And we see, so life takes place. We experience life in the different kingdoms, the plant kingdom, the beginning of a spiral cycle, the red color, and the animal kingdom. Where is the cursor? There you are. Where we have terrestrial human being and our planet there. And we're actually in the second parts of the animal kingdom, heading towards the true human kingdom, where we become spiritual beings eventually, full of universal love, and the kingdom of wisdom, the divine world, and the kingdom of bliss, where we eventually become satiated of light and start longing to become physical beings again, and take the form of mineral, and then into the plant kingdom again in the next spiral cycle. And we're experiencing life all the time, and but in very different ways. And what decides how we experience life, that is regulated by these two sexual poles that we will learn more about here. And it's also really about understanding the necessity of darkness in the spiral cycle, the darkness in life, in order to guarantee an eternal experience of life for all of us. And let's see what Martinus says here. Oh, I need to move this. How do I do that? There. The maintenance of this cycle is thus promoted by the principle of the highest fire. You can see some flames on this symbol. Martinus doesn't name them in the symbol explanation, but we believe, so to say, that they symbolize the highest fire, which is this, you can say, hunger for experience, and the fire that fuels the whole machinery of the spiral cycle and of life. I'll take the quotation from the beginning again. The maintenance of this cycle is thus promoted by the principle of the highest fire. This fire is in turn the same as the principle of hunger and satiation, the culmination of whose manifestation is sexuality. And he goes on, sexuality is in turn the same as any kind of pleasurable experience or sensual pleasure, which in turn is the same as any kind of feeling of satiation, any kind of well-being. So you see here, it's both rather abstract. I mean, what is the highest fire? One can wonder. I think we need more intuition to really understand that, at least I do. But also very concrete. We all know about pleasure and pain, or sensual pleasure, and the sense of well-being. That's familiar for us. And let's go on and look at the living being, symbol number 6. And this is the structure of all living beings, wherever we are, galaxies, or we are a planet, or an organ, an elephant, or an ant, or a human being. We have this triune principle of the I, which was the same and part of the Godhead's I. We have our super consciousness, the creative ability and ability to experience, and we have the created world, the last lower section. And he will mention here the primordial desire, and the I needs to experience life, but the I in itself cannot experience life. The I in itself does never exist. We always exist with these 3 units together. So it's only in the analysis that we separate them. And in order, the I has an urge to experience, an undifferentiated wish or urge to experience that Martinus names the primordial desire. He calls it a kind of glue between X1 and X2 and X3. And then the primordial desire goes through, so to say, these poles that we will just shortly get to, the masculine and the feminine pole. And he hasn't marked them in this symbol, but in my imagination, they are sort of high up or very fundamental in our superconsciousness. And the energy is then differentiated through the talent kernels, and then and is very differently organized depending on where we are in the spiral cycle. And then they are manifested in the created world, physically and or spiritually, or only spiritually, depending on where we are. So let's listen to Martinus here. The eternal I must thus, through this X2 and through its X2 and X3, create 2 different forms of energy. This creation is triggered by the 2 eternal centers in X2 and spreads to X3 where it is perfected. These 2 centers are thereby the I's eternal organ of life. Listen to that, the I's eternal organ of life. That's worth giving a thought. And it goes on, through these 2 poles, that's the masculine and feminine pole, through these 2 poles, the primordial desire of the I becomes its creative faculty, which in turn means its ability to feel pleasantness and unpleasantness. And this ability is thus the innermost structure of all sensory perception and creation. The entire experience of life is but variations of the experience of pleasantness and unpleasantness. This is an extraordinary mix of something rather abstract, the primordial desire, where is that, so to say, and then something that we recognize from our daily life, pleasantness and unpleasantness. And absolutely all movements, all formation of substances, all climatic conditions, and all things that can be experienced or sensed at all are rooted in and promoted by the living being's masculine and feminine poles. I'm mentioning this mainly to give us the feel of how fundamental these spiritual organs and structures are in our cosmic construction. They don't, and that as a consequence, we don't change sex between incarnations, according to Martinus. Yes, what comes next? Yes, and here we are in the human beings in the second part of the animal kingdom, and life was probably easier when we were more pure animal beings with the masculine, a clear masculine and feminine pole, where governed by instinct, we didn't have to think, and we were definitely less confused. And where we are now, we have periods, most of us, where we experience some kind of intimacy, either within a family, in a marriage, or in some kind of partnership. And we also experience lots of divorces, that this amorous love doesn't last. And there are many phenomena today that we don't understand, at least not from a common point of view, because the common point of view is that there has always been women and always been men, and we get married, have children, and so on, and that's the way it will always be. Darwin never mentioned anything about sexual evolution. So there is a lot of confusion and lots of phenomena today that are difficult, that our old world picture doesn't really explain. But here Martinus really delivers answers. And it's becoming more and more difficult world over to avoid knowing something about the Pride Festival, sex change, the LGBTQ, which means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. And it's difficult to ignore that. And when these analyses spread, whenever that's going to happen, they'll be extremely helpful. Because according to Martinus, being man and woman is a temporary state necessary in order to create darkness in the spiral cycle for the living being to experience life eternally. But you can't go out into the street and say that, just sort of like anything. So in its innermost principle, each being is double-poled. And if we go on to look at this symbol, it's symbol 35, the cosmic cycle of the pole principle, we can see in a survey here over how our poles work. And here we see the spiral cycle laid out horizontally. And in these steps, here we see the different kingdoms, the red one, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the true human kingdom, the kingdom of wisdom, the green, the blue, the divine world where intuition is flourishing, and the kingdom of bliss. And there we see how we go on to the next spiral cycle with a new kingdom of a new plant kingdom and so on. So in order to explain the cycle of these poles, we need two spiral cycles. As we can see further up in the symbol, these horizontal figures, the green, we have one living being here and one living below and one higher up. And the one below, you can see is in the animal kingdom of the spiral cycle is a female, because the yellow color is the female pole and the green represents the masculine pole. And we see here that in the animal kingdom, the masculine pole in this being has decreased to a minimum in the center, and therefore this being appears as a woman. And opposite then in the male being, that is the feminine being, the feminine pole that has decreased and become latent. And this is where we are, men and women, and also animals, male and female and male animals. But we can also see that in this perspective, it's a very short period, and very soon the opposite pole, the one that has been latent, starts growing, and that's where we as human beings are. And we see that very soon they are equal. We acquire cosmic consciousness, and then for 5 kingdoms ahead of us, we have fully developed masculine. We are fully developed double pole beings with a maximum of the poles in the middle of the divine world, and then they decrease slightly. Oh, I'm showing with my hands here. It's instinctive. We see they decrease a little bit, and it's not until in the following spiral cycle that they actually decrease again, and then they decrease in the opposite way. So the being that was a female being in the animal kingdom as a human being or an organism here will be a male planet being in the next spiral cycle and experience life from that perspective. And opposite then, the being that was male in this spiral cycle will be a female in the following. So that's quite a wide perspective, one could say, and perhaps takes a while to get used to. But what we also see here, that the purpose of this difference, the decrease and increase in the poles, that is what creates darkness we need in order to experience life eternally. And we see at the top of the symbol, you see the darkness is at its peak in the middle of the animal kingdom, where we are totally one-poled. And when this sympathetic ability, these poles are our organs for the faculty of our sympathetic organs, one can call them. And when one of them diminishes, we become able to love only one person, and it has to be a person of the opposite sex. And everybody else becomes rivals. And that's the root of all war and all nationalism, according to Martinus. All unrest in the world is created due to this change in the poles, where we become one-poled. So there we have a culmination of darkness, the darkness we need in order for, we soon have cosmic consciousness in this time perspective, but we need the contrast that we've been through of the suffering and difficulties in the animal kingdom. We need those as a background in order to be able to experience the light. And the light grows and grows and grows until the middle of the divine world. And there we've sort of used up the pain and suffering, and we start to have a need of experiencing more suffering. It doesn't occur until quite a while further on, but we begin to be satiated, become satiated by the light, and our day consciousness, it doesn't nourish our day consciousness anymore in the same way. So eventually we need the poles to change again and go through a new period of darkness and suffering in order to keep life going, life experience going. And let's look here. The fact that the being's sexual cycle spans over 2 spiral cycles is an inevitable prerequisite for the simultaneous existence of male beings and female beings. It's rather smart, isn't it? A good arrangement, I would say. What else would decide who's going to be male and who's going to be female? But then back to this symbol again. We have not yet looked at these 2 figures in the black part here. In the animal kingdom, we see a circle with an orange ring around it, which symbolizes that it is the animal kingdom. And we see 2 beings, a male the green with its latent feminine pole there in the middle, and a woman or feminine being with its latent masculine pole. And we see that they are interconnected, and they are in sexual intercourse experiencing sexual culmination, and which is, one can say, it is the light of the divine Godhead in the darkness. So God never lets go of us. We always have one kind of connection. There's always a kind of connection. And this experience of being in love and the sexual satisfaction of being together with a partner of the opposite sex, which has been the main case, it's no longer the main case. It's been praised and praised and still is praised. And the common view of the difference between amorous love and universal love is very confused. Maybe people can sense that, well, there is a difference, but I have not come across it as clearly as this, other than in Martinus's analysis. And from his point of view, he describes it as artificial and governed by hormones and instincts. And soon we've begun to grow out of that, which Michael and Mary will tell you much more about. And the rings in the divine figure here in the divine world, we see a being that is fully double-poled. We see the yellow and the green. They are not quite the same size on the symbol, but they are the same size, and they are at their maximum expansion. And life is totally wonderful. And every meeting with every being there and with the Godhead is a climactic experience. So it's far beyond my imagination, and it's wonderful to read about, but I can't say I understand it. So what we are experiencing now is minute compared with what is waiting for us. And here is a symbol where Martinus actually has marked the poles. Where are we on time? It's symbol number 66, the human being in the perfect thought climate. And just a moment. We see here, it's in the Eternal World Picture 6, which is mainly about health and illness. And here he describes how in this being, all the basic energies are in order. They are ruling in the place where they should be. And that's not very common as yet. We all have a bit of disorganization in our body and how we handle the basic energies. But what I want to show you here is our primary pole that has its expression through our sexual organs. But when we are one-pole beings, they are the whole of our being. The primary pole then shows and manifests itself in our thinking and in our bodily structure, the whole of us. And the secondary pole has its sort of physical expression in our brain. It's an intellectual pole, and that's the one that is growing in all of us at the moment. And just a short list here of the primary pole, the characteristics of the primary pole. It's governed by the instinct of propagation, or it governs the instinct of propagation and the instinct of self-preservation. We are ourselves closest. It's unintellectual, therefore instinctual. There's possessiveness. You want and need the other partner, and at some point you are prepared to kill somebody else to have the one you want. It creates intrigues. There's jealousy, expectations, and demands. It's selfish. Martinus calls us the root of all evil. And it represents darkness, but also light in the darkness. And the secondary pole, the one that is causing confusion for us today, but is also our future. It's conscious, not instinctive. It's compassionate and generous. It's intellectual, gives freedom, forgives everything. It's lasting and reliable, as opposed to amorous love. It's certainly not reliable. It's unconditional. There are no demands. We are sort of don't need each other in the way that we do nowadays. And it's the pole of universal love, represents the light, the root of all light and love. And I'll jump this. And when we've been through this transformation of the poles and go into the true human kingdom as double pole beings, this is the description, a small description of how what Martinus says about life then. It, the being, now lives permanently in the highest fire, where even the slightest contact with another being from this plane is an act of copulation in the form of a climactic manifestation of universal love that delights not merely the beings concerned, but also those around them. And the being has become a new instrument for the radiant profusion of God's Spirit, or the manifestation of universal love that shines and sparkles through eternal space, maintaining suns and worlds and the multiplicity of living beings. Thank you. Now what do I do?